Good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Made in New York Animation Project Mega Group. My name is Linda Sylvester and I'll be your host for today. This group is scheduled to run from 3 to 4 o'clock p.m. Please note that today's group will be shorter than usual. Before we begin, let's go over some information about this webinar. This group will operate in webinar format. Attendees will not be able to turn on their video or microphone during mega groups. You are counted in attendance as soon as you logged in. You do not need to follow up with us regarding attendance. If you lose connection, try to rejoin the webinar as soon as possible. You will still receive your incentive even if you get disconnected from the webinar. All right, let's begin. Very excited for today's group. Let's take a look at today's goals. So first we'll have our opening ritual. Then we'll go into scheduling and incentives information. Our animation industry guest speaker for today is Aliyah Sophia Murad. Then we'll go into our Q&A, and then we'll have our closing ritual. It brings me great joy to welcome back Natasha Mendelara, a drama therapist and workforce development manager at TAP. Hey, Natasha, what's our opening ritual for today?
Hi, Lyndon. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's so amazing to be back here. I love Wednesdays being with all of you. And for those of you who have been here before, you know at TAP, we start every single group with an opening question together so we can come into the space together. We will also close the group together. We have a really amazing guest today that's going to be talking about production. And a big part of production is managing our time. So we thought for our opening, an interesting question would be, if a genie granted you 1 extra hour in every single day, how would you spend that hour? You could spend it however you wanted. You get the gift of 1 extra hour. How would you spend it? So you will see a link in the chat where you can go and put your response to this question. And you can go directly to that link. There'll be a space to put your response. And when we get back here, we will return to this Zoom space and we will watch your responses come alive.
It's an interesting question. Makes me think.
Makes me think too.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, they're already coming in.
Yeah. Let's see, sleep. Spend time with friends, cooking and eating, and helping out mom.
A lot of sleep. I had a feeling that that would come up. With my dogs, beautiful exercise, looking for inspiration. I love that. Gaming, very cool.
Volunteering, being productive, drawing, watching anime, watching my show.
Comics, spend time with friends, meditating, chill. A really amazing way to spend an extra hour in the day. I love that. Netflix.
Gaming, animated shorts, rollerblading.
Yeah, I just saw rollerblading. That's awesome. So many really, really amazing talents and hobbies in here. Watch more TV, go outside exploring, practice drawing. These are all such amazing responses. Thank you all so much for populating this Zoom space with all of your responses.
Totally, such great responses. I could totally relate to a lot of these.
Definitely. Lyndon, do you know what you would do with 1 extra hour in your day?
Well, for me, I would probably get some sleep. I've been needing it lately, so it would be pretty helpful.
Yeah, I think I would say the same. You know, it's really important for our well-being, so I think that's a great answer.
Totally, it's always a great answer.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for engaging with us in our opening ritual.
All right, Before we welcome today's guest speaker, let's review some information about scheduling and incentives.
So some scheduling reminders for you. As wild as it sounds, next Wednesday is our last mega group of the summer. So we are coming to a close of this mega group series. And we thank you in advance so much for joining us. Those of you who have come back week after week, or those of you who are just joining for the first time, thank you so much for being here with us this summer. And stay tuned for next Wednesday when we will have some announcements about programming moving forward past the summer.
Incentives information. When will I be paid? So I just wanted to make a note that the dates for payment has changed. The incentive cards were sent out late. So you'll see right here that you'll be paid by August 16th. You'll be paid for the groups you attended on July 14th, 21st, and 28th by August 16th. And you will be paid for the groups you attended on August 4th, 11th, and 18th by September 1st.
And if you have any questions at all about your incentives, this email address on the screen is who to contact. You'll also see it in the chat right now. It is tapincentives@theanimationproject.org.
Now it's time to welcome our moderator for the guest speaker portion of today's mega group. Hello again, Leo Andy Santana. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Lyndon. Glad to be back. I had a lot of fun last week. So today with us, we have Aaliyah, who is a freelance producer and has experience in executive producing. Please welcome Aaliyah.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I just want to remind everybody in the chat that please feel free to ask your questions, right? This is a great opportunity to have industry professionals like Aaliyah to answer some of those questions that we all had, right? So before I got into the industry, that was always one of my questions, like producing, and how does somebody even get into producing? So we would like to know more about you, Aaliyah. Like, how did you find yourself in your role? What's the story?
Let's give the shorter version. Well, I started as a PA at the Mill. Before that, I had worked at the Tribeca Film Festival as a coordinator for, it's called, it was like a Tribeca youth program. And the reason I wanted to do it is that when I was at college, I interned at the Tribeca Film Festival. I always knew that I wanted to like work in film or TV in some capacity. And during my time at Tribeca, one of the tours that we took was at a post-production house. And we took it at the Mill, which is where I met Kat, who connected me with all you guys. But I remember like the first time we took a tour there, I was like, oh, like there's like this whole other side of the industry that I just wasn't even that aware of. And after I finished at Tribeca, I got a PA position at the Mill, and it just all kind of excelled from there. I think that something that I learned pretty early on in college was that, you know, you need to build connections. And I think I'm a very chatty person. So I think that always came kind of naturally for me. But then I think once I got to the Mill, it was like this whole new world. That like something that I tried to focus on when I first started as a PA was like finding the people within that bubble that I wanted to emulate. Whose career did I essentially want to steal? And I think that became like a great avenue for me and a great motivator. And, you know, I befriended people like Kat, who was, you know, she was like the central force of all the artists and all the producers, and she's the main scheduler at the time. So she was so integral to how everything worked. And I think that made it really easy to see what she was doing. And I think so often when you're first getting into production, it's like, how do you learn all the steps? And people are like, oh, just be a PA on a set. And I definitely believe that. You're a PA on a set, like what you can do is observe everyone and you see all the different positions and you see how that flows. But then when you go into an office, especially when you're a PA, you're kind of left to like, the more grueling of tasks, the ones that don't exactly show you what the ins and outs of the job are, that you kind of have to align yourself with the people that you want to emulate. So I think that was something that became really like just a huge asset to me. I learned so much from Kat, and then I eventually, moved on to being a scheduler. I eventually like worked in digital there. And then I kind of made my way through working at a bunch of different post houses. And through post production, I met a lot of great directors. And when I started at MPC, another post house, is where I met Crystal Moselle, who is the director of the show that I'm now the executive producer on. And it started in one of the most like innocent of ways. I was still very low on the totem pole and was kind of the person that was regulated to a lot of weekend work, especially like remote grading sessions, like color grading sessions. And I like will never forget, like they're like, yeah, there's this director, like she's like this blonde girl from LA. She's kind of like a little ditzy, like she doesn't pay attention. Like you got to get in there and like keep her on track. She only has a certain amount of hours to grade this project. Like she's not a big director yet. So like we can't give her too much time. And in that like 5-hour session, I made a friendship that has literally lasted a lifetime. And I made a connection that then became like my entryway into the first film I ever produced. And then now my first TV show. And we're in the process of launching a production company together. We have like a bunch of film projects in the works. That it all happened super fluidly. But when I think about it, a lot of it happened from my first internship, because I remember when I worked at Tribeca as an intern before I had a real position, I had seen Crystal's documentary, The Wolf Pack, like over and over again, because she was trying to get funding for it. That I had this great access to the industry, but still from like this lower position where you're just really seeing people. You're not really like making those like connections where you feel like they know you. But then all of that stuff ended up like completely working to my favor later on. That if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have known her history, and then I wouldn't have had the same history of the industry that I do now. If that answered the question.
Yeah, no, 100%. Is always it's just crazy how things just kind of just fall in place, right? Did you know what a PA? So I have a two-parter question, one from me and one from our chat. Ipazia Genova asked, what exactly does a PA do? And my question for you is, did you know what a PA did before you became a PA, and how was that different than what you perceived it to be?
I think because, well, in college, I had produced a lot of short films. And I think in the process of making a film and being in film school, you kind of like learn what PAs are through that organically. But a PA can exist in so many different capacities. You can have someone on set who's like the liaison between the first director and the second director and who's working with talent. Or you can have an office PA that's more of like a facilities service worker in some capacity that also helps with production. So like, I think the term in itself has like, it can fall into so many different categories, but like, I think the best way to be a PA is to go into it knowing that like you're like the tool that can be used in a bunch of different ways. And the only way that you can help yourself is being a really good listener and almost being like nosy. Like, I think like what I think helped me as a PA was that like I was constantly listening to the conversations around me, that I was really good at taking notes in meetings. And I was really good at like keeping up with the dialogue of what was going on. And even when I didn't understand something, by writing it down and being able to revisit it later and finding that one person that you can actually ask questions to that's not going to judge you is like super helpful. But I think like when you first start out being a set PA, they don't expect you to know everything. They actually like, I think, and every production runs a little bit differently, that I think working as a set PA is personally, I think, a lot more fun. Because you get to just see, you get to see all the different arms of production at work at the same time. Whereas in post-production, you don't really, you don't get as much access. So you actually have to work harder to understand things. So I think like any young person that was going to go into PAing at a post house, I think like the best thing to do is like learn what everyone does and be really good at remembering everyone's name, and asking to sit into meetings to just take notes if they want an extra hand, and finding a producer that looks really busy and seeing how you can help them. I think that my mom always says that like a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So in order to excel in any PA position you have to put yourself out there, and you have to kind of get out of your shell to realize that like people can throw you tasks, or you can have someone that's like keeping you in the loop. And I think the way you become the person that's kept into the loop is by like always being there and ready. I hope that helped answer.
Yeah. And that actually lends to one of my follow-up questions, whereas can a shy person succeed as a PA? Like any advice as to how they would get out of their shell to succeed?
I think one of the, how does a shy person succeed? I think in my mind, I feel like everybody has the ability to succeed if you believe that you want to. And I think if you know that you aren't the most social and the most outgoing, it's kind of good to make your own agenda of what you want. You know, you're started a place, you kind of research where you're going into before. On LinkedIn, you have access to so much knowledge as to what people do, that like, I'd say like if you're starting in a post house, like you figure out who the head of production is, the head of CG, the head of 2D, the head of design, you figure out who the MD is, you see what kind of work they've done, you kind of like figure out who from there is someone that you're interested in, and then you kind of like build a roadmap for yourself. Because if you're someone that doesn't like engaging with people one-on-one, you can always send someone an email and try to like carve out time with them. But I think what benefits like loudmouths like myself is that like you just kind of like force your way into things a little bit more. But I think that it can happen either way. It really can.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of things, right? It's not just for PA, it's for many opportunities out there where it's kind of a shy person can, like, you don't have to fall back on being shy. You can find other ways to communicate, and definitely email is one. How would you say being a PA, and just a reminder to our listeners, a PA stands for production assistant, right?
Yeah.
And how would that be? How is that different than being a producer?
Being a producer, you're kind of you're like the conductor of the opera. You know, like you're the person that needs to be in control of the schedule, the budget. You need to manage your talent, from your actors to your directors to your artists that are like doing your visual effects or your color grades or your audio. Being a producer, you hold all the cards, and you're meant to be the leader. You're the ally to the director to help them communicate their ideas to your client, to help them communicate their ideas to the team. So the PA is like an essential tool to a producer, but the jobs are very different.
I always found it like a producer isn't just like a job, but it's also like a lifestyle. Like being an organized kind of person is, you take it with you even outside of work. So first I want to ask a question in the chat before I move on to some of mine, which is what does a scheduler do, or in general, how do you go about scheduling?
Yeah, so a scheduler is the person that will find all the resources for the producers and for each project. So they will be they network to find talent, so they constantly have to keep a talent database up to date. They reach out to the artists, they work with like the leads on the projects to assess like what kind of artists they need for their project. They work with the producers on the budgets that they want to hit, And then on like the back end, they're the person that like updates the hours and whatever kind of like budgetary tools that you're using. They will be the person that helps coordinate sometimes with the PAs as to like getting packages messengered or getting drives over to people. But the scheduler is probably one of the most thankless jobs, but it's the one where you get to learn about every department. And I'm so grateful that I was a scheduler because it has been something that's helped me throughout my career. And I think like being able to know so many artists, it's been so useful, especially in remote times where, now that I'm a freelancer, I work at a bunch of different studios. It's a really busy time and it's really hard to find people. And I think that like me having access to like all of the people that I've worked with and them knowing me in the scheduling capacity, they already hit me up still to check in if anyone's available, if anyone needs anything. So I think it's like this great way to learn about what the production company you work at does, but also to like learn the different skill sets of artists and making those kind of connections.
Nice. And so back to my earlier question about just being a lifestyle. Were you always organized, or is that something that you've learned throughout your job?
I have dyslexia and ADD, and being organized is definitely not something that came to me naturally. I think that like I have my own chaos that feels organized to me, but it's definitely something that throughout the years, it's like a muscle. Like the more that you use it and the more you do it, the easier it is. And as a freelancer, you realize that like every studio is different. Every studio has a different way that they like to do things, different way they like to schedule things, that like you have to keep a clear idea of what your sense of organization looks like in order to like put yourself into all these different places that you can work at. But I say the best way to stay organized is to be a good note taker. Is to always take notes.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with it myself. I think I will try writing down. From what I hear, writing down things is a lot better than trying to verbally take a memo. Or so. From my experience as an animator, producers are often seen as the antagonist, right? Where it's kind of like you have to keep your artist and your talent on schedule sometimes when things are very chaotic at times. How do you combat that, like feeling like you have to be the aggressor in times where you want to be you want to be everybody's friend?
I think it's about keeping a fair balance of things. I think that it's almost expected that you are going to be good cop and bad cop. That's just like the nature of the job in itself. But I think that like you're meant to keep everyone on track. So it's just a part of your job. Like you shouldn't feel like you need to be aggressive because you're just being clear. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah. No, 100% does. So in general, how do you think your job has changed because of COVID? How is it different?
Well, for post-production, I think that everyone really quickly, like I almost want to say overnight, figured out how to do things remotely. And with that, there came a lot of road bumps. It's definitely a lot harder working with artists and not being in a physical space where you can just go downstairs and ask someone a question. Delivering projects is definitely a lot harder because you're watching like 1,000 spots on your personal computer, and that's definitely daunting. But then for like physical production, I think one of our biggest challenges with making Betty was, it's really hard working with people with a mask on all the time. It's really hard to like get the communication that you get through visually seeing someone's entire face was gone, that I think it made things a bit harder. But the minute we got into a good groove, we were just flying, and it was actually really fun. It just required a lot more people. We definitely had like very rigid testing. We forced people to live in pods for like 3 months. It was definitely really challenging. It was certainly not something that we'd want to do again, but sadly, it seems like if we do get our third season, we will probably be shooting it with COVID still very much a part of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're all trying to get out of this, just going by.
But
So
one thing we did do creatively though was write COVID into our script, which a lot of shows didn't. And that was like something that we were like one of the first shows in New York to go into production after COVID. And I think it wasn't until like our third week of shooting that we were like, oh, like all these soap operas are using like face tone masks and having people in deep focus. Like, are we crazy for writing in COVID? And we're like, no, like it's so like the vibe of our show is so real that like it felt like it felt like we were doing some disservice by not having COVID a part of it. So I say add COVID to your narrative storylines if you want to. But yeah, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah, no, there's no reason to ignore what we all see, right? We see it every day. So
And
yeah,
people really appreciated it. People like to see like their real lives go down. Yeah.
yeah. You're more connected with something that is in our reality, something that is true everywhere. So what would you say you enjoy most about your role as a producer?
Well, it really depends. Like I think it's always fun bringing something to life. I think what I love the most about animation is like, especially from being a producer, like you get to see things build from start to finish. So you get to see the drawings that then become a previs, that then becomes a CG animation, that then gets comped into a spot and is amazing and great. I think that's what I love most about post-production. I like that you get to see every step of the process. And then in my other role as like a producer on a TV show, it's just amazing being able to bring stories to life that feel real to your own life. You know, like our show features 4 women of color and the storylines are very much centered around their narratives. And you know, it's the first time that like a network like HBO is showing that version of women. You know, like I think as someone who came of age in my 20s during like a show like Girls, like I never watched that show and felt like I could relate to anyone. I felt like I was watching a melodrama that had nothing to do with me. And what I love about Betty is that you have a cross section of women that represent more of what I think the world looks like, and especially what New York City looks like. So for me, being able to do that show just feels like deeply rewarding in so many different levels.
Yeah, even I grew up with that show, and and I could relate to it, to Girls, and even Betty. So it's something that I can relate to, just working on something that other people can kind of respect and grow into, and kind of like enjoy, that kind of alters their trajectory. But I taking, sorry for the noise outside, but taking a step outside of producing, what are some things that you do as a side hobby, or something to take your mind off of things when work gets too chaotic?
Well, I mean, I actually love street casting. I did that on the side for so long, like before I had my son, who's 2.5 years old. But I love talking to people. And I think that street casting was something that just happened pretty organically for me. And been, it's been something that's brought me so much joy and it's just been so much fun. Um, and that's something I definitely do. I also I try to like write every morning for like at least write like 2 pages, just like whatever is on my mind. I don't stop and think about it, but like that really is like that's become like a hobby for me. I wanted to be more of a writer, but I also think it's good to like just empty out your brain. And then I meditate and I love painting. Me and my son paint and draw all the time. So it's something I love doing as a hobby too.
So that's actually something I didn't know, actually, street casting. So just a reminder to everybody in the chat, ask your questions. I know that you guys have a lot of questions. I have
there are many different kinds of cast. Will get like your main talent. They're like the Tom Cruise, like Julia Fox, like the big names. And then you have like kind of like background casting. They will cast people that are just, you know, a part of the atmosphere. And then street casting is become so popular over the past, like, I want to say like 8 or 9 years. Like people like Harmony Korine is someone who like loves like street casting. They love finding like real people that they can put into their projects. And as I mean, as you guys have probably all seen from any commercial we've ever seen now, I think street casting has become even more prominent because people love featuring real people and everything. So what street casting is just the version of that. Like you're finding talent on any corner and you're putting them into things. Like I've probably turned 200 skaters into actors over the past 3 years because they were street casting in something and then they got into a commercial and then they were like, wait, I can do this to make money. Like, oh, great. Like I'll keep on doing it then. So it's really fun. I think that it's something that is super easy to get into if you're a social person. And if anyone is interested, you should just look up different casting directors and see if they want a street caster because every place uses people.
That sounds like so much fun. Like I can only imagine how out of the norm it might feel as I'm just finishing doing groceries and then I get contacted by you in person. Have you ever like had like one of those funny experiences where someone who at first rejected that idea and somehow got convinced all in a brief moment?
Oh my God, yeah, so often that happens. I mean, I've had that happen a lot, especially when I was doing this director, Miles J, was doing a music video for Jay-Z that was like set in like the 70s. And he needed like very specific looks, and it was really hard to find what he was looking for. And it required going into like a lot of different communities where people just had not even heard of it before. You know, like they're like, what are you talking about? You want me to be in something? That I had a lot of people reject me that then like later on through some convincing came back around and now are like completely in like acting groups and doing like improv classes and have like totally changed their lives. Like, especially on Betty too, actually. Like we've had this one kid that like, he just had such an interesting look and he has like a very funny accent and like, just like this gregarious personality. And like, he had so much aversion to it. And like, literally just the other day, he was like, yeah, so what kind of improv classes should I be taking? Like, do you like this acting instructor? That it just like made me laugh because like 3 years ago, he like wouldn't answer my phone calls, wouldn't respond to text messages. I'd like see him at the skate park and be like, hey, like called you a bunch of times today. That now he's like, that's all he wants to do. So I think it's amazing. It's really fun. I love that you can like change someone's life. And like also I think people just they become in awe of seeing themselves on screen all of a sudden.
Yeah, yeah, that's just wild. I want to ask something that Shamima Ruhi asked. Do you look for specific people when street casting? And my follow up is, how specific does it get? And do you ever feel like you're kind of being invasive by kind of approaching someone?
100%. I feel like if you don't have like one of the things with street casting is that like you have to have the ability to walk up to somebody like, hey, can I ask you a question? Would you want to be in this? Like you kind of have to be comfortable with talking to strangers. And people are usually really specific. I've had only had one job where the director was like, I just trust you. And I was like, all right, well, I can't really cast this. Like, I'm gonna have to cast it from Instagram while I'm at my current job. So it's just gonna be what it's gonna be. He's like, that sounds great. Like, don't even worry about it. I was like, you don't have anything specific? He's like, nope. And I literally cast an entire music video sitting at my computer at work on basically like in between my lunch break and like whenever I had a spare minute. And it's like funny in that way. Like you have to be okay with just hitting people up and just like knowing that you have to probably ask 20 more people than you think to get one person. And it's definitely something that's not for the weak of heart because people will yell at you and tell you to go away. And it can be really hard. Like I cast a project once that was based on like real people, and it was all about people that like worked in the Lower East Side. And it was really hard finding like older people that even like remotely wanted to do it. That it like, I remember on the last day before they were going to shoot, I was like, I just don't think you're going to find like, I just don't know what to do. So I literally went to a community board meeting at a public school that was in the Lower East Side and just like waited for it to finish, and then like started talking to these old women about like their chess club and their knitting club, and was like, what do you guys do? Like, do you ever take photographs? Like, so you really have to be quick on your feet and like think out of the box. But it's definitely like, it's the most fun you'll ever have. It really is.
It sounds kind of like you're hunting, right?
It's
But instead of
100% like hunting. 100% like hunting. When I was casting one music video, the one I was talking about earlier for Miles for Jay-Z, another friend was shooting the same weekend as us, and they had a very similar treatment, and it was also for Jay-Z. So we were like, it was like a casting war. Like me and like 3 different street casters like kept on bumping into each other, and we kept on like overbooking people together. That was like the only time that I've ever experienced like the real hunting nature of it, where I was like, I gotta go to this different park and they won't know about it. I was like, I gotta take an Uber there so they don't see what bus I'm taking. It can become really, really, really crazy. But that was literally the only time I've had that experience. But it was definitely like a good adrenaline push.
I almost feel like it deserves its own TV show.
I
Like,
I've definitely thought about that a lot. And it's a really funny job. And there's a great woman called Eleanor Hendricks, who's this amazing actress who's an incredible street caster. She's like legendary. So if anybody wants to see an OG person, I highly suggest following her on Instagram. She's one of the best.
that's awesome. Amanda asked, what would be the ups and downs of being a freelancing producer? And have you felt pressure entering something new and just going in as yourself?
I actually get what you're saying. It's like, it's what's like the most difficult part of being a freelance producer is that like you kind of every studio runs itself differently, and I think that poses its own challenges in itself. But you have to learn how to balance your time, and you kind of have to like manage your expectations. Like I'm at a job right now where, you know, I've been there for like 3 weeks, but every project that I've had has been super fast and furious that I really don't know a lot of what the full-time people at the company do or who they are. That I'm constantly having to be like, hey, so what does this person do again? And who's that? Like there's a lot more you have to retain when you're doing freelance. And I think that in itself can be really, really, that can cause a lot of pressure. But when you're freelance, you do have more control over when you take bookings. I know that like as like a single mom, I'm like, there's never a day I can't work. Like I'll work every day. But like you have to be good at like giving yourself a break and giving yourself time to be creative, to sleep, to spend time with your friends and your family. You know, so I think like freelancing has that opportunity to like be more in control of your own schedule, but you do have the demands of like the shifting workflow and like learning what studios do better and what studios don't, and what places organize and which places not, that you kind of like, you roll the dice every time.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Kendall asked, what is the most challenging, I guess, moment in your career?
Oh man, how long do you have? I'm joking. There's there have been a lot of challenging moments in my career. I think that through the changes we've seen with BLM, I think that people have had a lot more respect for women of color in general. I think that like out of most of the post houses I've worked at, I've never met another Black producer until working at the mill maybe last year. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. There was one Black producer that worked in the mill when I first started. He's based in London, so I didn't really see him all the time. But I remember thinking like, oh, wow, there's someone that looks like me. But throughout my career, I think one of the most challenging things was like learning how to use my voice and learning to be okay with it. It took me a really long time to like speak up for myself and to not let people walk all over me. And that's definitely been difficult. I've definitely had moments where people were telling me I was screaming when I was talking at a very moderate tone. And I think that like through those difficult moments of what is truly just like a lack of diversity in a workspace, you learn a lot about your own character. And I think that I had one moment where this producer was just like, she's the head of production. She was just so deeply, incredibly rude and offensive, and would constantly talk with me with her hands. And like, I remember like, it was a moment where she was like criticizing something that I was wearing in context to like the way that I was doing something with work. And I was just like, I like literally had like, there was like a huge, like, what the, like, you know, you're like, what the hell is this person talking about? That like, I, I just stood there silently and I just let her behave the way she was going to behave. And then I was like, okay, I'm leaving now though, because my work day is done and I don't have anything else to say to you. And I think like 35-year-old me looks at 25-year-old me and is like, you should have spoken up for yourself and told her that she was rude and told her that like, you don't deserve to be treated that way and that everyone deserves to be respected and that your wardrobe has nothing to do with your work. And like, I think that's something that you only really learn with age and with being honestly like a good listener. I think that like people can cut you down in any capacity, but like you can only let people cut you down. It's really, you really have the control to speak for yourself and to walk away or to not engage in an argument, which is something I always highly suggest. Like nobody's worth arguing with, because at the end of the day, like unless you're working in the medical profession and you're saving lives, we are just making things. Therefore, there's no reason for anyone to ever be rude or yell at anyone else. And that's just something I've kind of always lived by.
What I love about what you're saying is it's not just by the experience. A lot of people can learn from hearing your experiences too. So the story that you gave, I think will empower a lot of people in our chat to see those moments and speak up in those moments. As someone who I entered, I decided to enter the industry as a minority, right? I'm Hispanic. I didn't see that much diversity before I entered. So as someone who is producing and can from in all these different studios, how do you see that diversity now?
I think people are making like a real effort to change, and it has some good and bads to it, because I think that the people that were there before, like someone like myself, I've had, especially since BLM, I've had a lot of companies reach out to me to ask if I wanted to suggest like a group of Black producers that could work with them. And like a part of me is like, yeah, sure. Another part of me is like, why don't you do the research yourself? Like, why are you contacting the only Black producer you ever worked with to like ask her to open up her library of people to you? Like that feels so, in some ways you're like, so you're not going to work with me anymore because you want to work with my other Black friends so that you can get more Black people in. That it's definitely, I think our industry is going through growing pains. And I think that there are people that mean well that are just learning how to like actually have dialogues that are productive. And I think some people just want to fill numbers. That I think like each person needs to like make their own assessment of where they're engaging and what they want to do. But I do see a real change in diversity, especially in post-production. I see people making a real effort to have more people of color on their projects. I know companies like Facebook even have like, you know, they have certain mandates to having people of color on certain projects. And I think that's interesting in itself, but it's a growing pain. It's going to keep on changing and evolving. And I think, especially from what I'm seeing on like the agency side, is that there needs to be not just like, it can't just be being inclusive. It has to actually be like giving people the space to either have the support they need because you know that they haven't had as much experience, or actually giving them projects that they're suited to learn that experience on. And I think that's something that has not been solved yet. I've worked with numerous producers that I feel like were promoted in certain capacities, but didn't have all the tools to actually meet that. And I think that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah. In many ways, it is encouraging hearing that diversity is expanding, but I do hear and understand the concerns. So in that, my comes my question about skills and like what does it take to get a job in production? Like, what would be some bullet points that you can give some of our listeners?
Well, it's definitely good to have internships and to at your internship, like align yourself with the powers that be. Like I feel like when I worked at the Tribeca Film Festival, I became really good friends with the director of programming. And through that, he introduced me to a bunch of other people that headed different departments. And like that has been like a friendship network of people that I've still lean on to this day. So I think like it's finding a good internship, it's making good connections while you're there. It's like going on places like LinkedIn and finding different companies that you want to work with, finding out who their recruiters are, sending them cold emails, asking if they want office PAs, asking like what kind of training programs they have, like what kind of work opportunities they have, and just kind of like working yourself up. And then when you can, like aligning with directors and other creatives and just helping people make things. Like you learn the most about producing through the things you don't get right. So I think like I'm super grateful that I made a lot of short films and I just learned so much on them, and they were painful and exhausting, but you get to learn the different steps of how things get made in an environment that I think is actually really safe, because everybody knows what everyone's skill set is when you're making a short film. Like nobody's expecting you to be like a Jane Rosenthal that knows every ins and outs of the industry. They're expecting you to just help them get something done. So I think like making good friendships with like different directors that you want to work with, or different actors that you like, or finding companies that you want to work with and like starting to build those relationships with the recruiters, and finding the different heads of departments that you want to work in. Like if you really love CG, like find out who the head of CG is at like MPC or the Mill, and like see if they want to get a coffee with you or do like a virtual talk or just answer some of your questions. I think it's all about meeting people, and that's how you kind of work your way up. At least that's how I did it.
Yeah. Uh, um, like I just want to first remind everybody before I forget that today we are ending earlier at 4. So please submit your questions because I want to make sure that everybody gets their questions. I think we have a great opportunity to get those questions here answered because I know production is one of those thankless kind of roles where it's like sometimes your that role isn't always as clear as some of the other ones, such as for me the difference between executive producer and a producer. I think that's one of the questions we haven't answered yet, and your experiences in both.
Being a producer, you're like more on the ground, and at least for post-production, like you're like the controller of the schedule, you're resourcing the artists, you're working like day to day in communication with your artists, you're the main contact to your client. Whereas like an EP in a post house, they would be more of like they have all the connections with agencies, so they do more of like the bidding, where like they work out how much a project's going to cost with an agency, and they work out like how many days that they're going to work on a project, and then the executive producer at the post house will then go to their head of production and say like, what producer is going to be right for this? Like, here's some leads for the project that will make sense. And then on like the executive producer side and like a TV show, it's like you're a part of everything from like the writer's room to finding the writers for the writer's room, the casting, to being in rehearsals, to going over drafts for the writing, to talking with the executives about the drafts for the writing. keeping your director from jumping off a bridge. Like you're literally like you're top to bottom everything. And when you're shooting, you're also the person that needs to like keep everything going. So I had a moment this year on Betty where an actor was having a tough day and they ran out of the space we were shooting in, and I was in the middle of a conversation and I saw them kind of leaving, and I was like, I know that's not going to end well. And then we couldn't find them for 2 hours. And then I was on the streets of Bushwick searching in the streets for someone for 2 hours. And like and then I talked to Joffrey Ledge. I got her back on the set. We reworked the schedule. We went into overtime and we shot the rest of the day. But like, in a nutshell, like when you're an executive producer on a TV show, like you are literally responsible for everyone. So if some PA or like, like Teamster is getting yelled at by like a drunk person on the street, like it is your responsibility to make sure that drunk person does not hurt them in any way, shape, or form. And if your director is having a meltdown and like won't move on from a shot and the day is killing in, it's your responsibility to go over to that director and talk them into moving things on. So you wear a lot of hats, and from the outside, it seems like you don't have to, and you just kind of kick back once you're an executive producer, but you truly do not. You are literally the lifeline to all of your heads of department, and you have to be on from the beginning of the idea till the marketing of getting it out the door. So it's truly never ending.
Those are some of the things I forget to even think about. Like, what happens if the talent runs away? Those are things you don't even think about. To the point where one of our questions came in from Lord Blackburn, who asked, how do you deal with anxiety of keeping everything together? And I think just for the sake of time, this might have to be our last question, but it's a great question.
How do you deal with anxiety? Well, I think that like I meditate. I also like have a crystal that I bring around all the time, and like lavender oil. That's when I'm shooting. I mostly do that because it's definitely been a clutch, a savior, so to speak. But you really just have to realize that like the best way to deal with being stressed out is like looking at everything in like a list form. Like, what do I need to do next? And just checking things off the box. And that's really hard when you're on set sometimes, because you have literally someone in your ear talking to you, and then you have someone physically in front of you talking to you, and then you get a text message on your phone and you get a phone call at the same time. And it can definitely be anxiety inducing. I definitely spent much time sitting in a trailer that was empty, just being like, why am I doing this? But you have to realize that like everything is going to work out as long as you keep it together and composed, because especially as an EP on a set, like you cannot be the one that falls apart. You have to be the one that like lets everyone know that there's calm and things will work out. And like, I know like this year we had like a crazy breakdown with like our styling department where like these two people were just clashing heads like over and over again, and like nothing could get done. And it just like, I remember watching it like it was like a car crash like happening in front of me. And like, it gave me so much anxiety because I was like, how do I help this stop? How do I help this not turn into what it's, and then sometimes you realize things are out of your control and you kind of need to let things run their course. And like in that moment, it was like absolutely horrible to watch and like so sad because people are like crying and screaming. You're like, they're just talking about Halloween costumes. Like it's all gonna be okay. But everybody takes their job really seriously. And I think that's something that you have to remember, that like, for the most part, no one wants to be rude. No one wants to be dismissive of anyone else's opinions. People just all really take what they do seriously. So you just have to like respect that like some people are good communicators and some people aren't. Some people are organized and some people aren't. That like what you can do is remember that like you're in control of your own, my cat, your own ability to like stay calm, that no one can stress you out unless you let them, and that you can always walk away. Like that is something that I think I took for granted, but like sometimes walking away can be the most powerful thing you can do when you see something not going the right way. Just being like, we probably need to stop this right now and just all break away and then come back together for this to be more productive. And like, I can't even count how many times I've had to say that before, but it's definitely the only way I've known to curb anxiety.
More things I didn't even think about, how stressful that could be. Not only having to deal with the talent, but also the staff, just everything could go haywire, and somehow you have to be the only person who has to always be level-headed.
Oh
That's
yeah.
a skill that, look, I applaud you. I understand you have to leave at 4. There are some questions, but I want to thank you so much for your time. I think we have to pass it back to Lyndon and Ellen, but I think I had such a great time talking with you, and I hope we get to hear from you again soon.
Yeah, same. This was so much fun. And like, I highly encourage people to find me on LinkedIn. You can ask me questions there. I will do my best to get back to you. And this was so much fun. So thank you guys so much. And big love to Kat for suggesting me for this. I'm so glad I got to do this. Well, bye, guys.
Amazing, amazing segment. Thank you so much, Leo and Aaliyah. It was really great hearing from both of you. I actually learned a lot from just having you both speak together, and it was really amazing. And as always, we welcome you back anytime, Aaliyah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aaliyah, for being here. I'm taking away so much from that presentation, about being a good listener and about how to approach challenging situations, knowing when to walk away, knowing when to stand up for yourself, and letting go of things we can't control. I'm really going to keep all of those things, such wise words for all of us here in this space. So much gratitude to our guest speaker today, and to Leo, who was an incredible moderator for that discussion. And it is 4 o'clock, so we will move into our closing for today. And I think it's just such a wonderful segue. We had our final question from Lord Blackburn about how to combat anxiety that might come up in a work situation or in challenging situations in general. So our closing is very much related, and something that we can always fall back on, and is something we're going to do together in this space to close out, which is we are going to take a big stretch together and a big deep breath. And I invite everyone to join us in this, and perhaps think about those things that we can't control. And with our exhales, we might just want to let go of those things in our bodies. And then we'll see how we feel afterwards, moving into the rest of our day. So we are going to take a big stretch up into the sky, if you can, whatever comfort level is appropriate for you. But on that stretch, we're going to take a big inhale. And then on the exhale, we're just going to let it go. And maybe we could do that one more time. So we'll just take a big inhale and stretch up to the sky, and let go of whatever it is we can't control.
It definitely is helpful.
Beautiful. I know I always feel better when I take a deep breath. And again, that's something that we can all do at any moment when we're feeling stressed or in a difficult situation. So thank you all for doing that with us at home. Thank you, Lyndon, for joining in that closing.
No problem.
As always, so wonderful to be here with everyone today.
Well, everyone, it looks like we've come to the end of another mega group. As always, please remember to stay connected with TAP through our website, including our social media. And again, thank you for joining the Made in New York Animation Project Mega Group. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.